The night was silent, and Luke was trying to process the turbulent events of the day as he stared at the ceiling of his room. The unfair dismissal still weighed on his mind, and he wondered how he would explain the situation to his mother and sister. Suddenly, an unexpected sound echoed through the house, breaking the silence. 3 firm knocks on the front door. Who could it be at this hour? Luke's heart raced as he got up, feeling that his life was about to change once again. But this time, the unexpected was lurking on the other side of the door. Luke had always believed that kindness was the only currency that never lost its value. Working for almost 2 years as a gas station attendant in the outskirts of the city, he knew the routine by heart: fueling cars, exchanging small talk with customers, and dealing with the constant noise of the pumps. It was a simple job, but Luke saw each day as an opportunity to make a difference, no matter how small. That afternoon, while adjusting the gas pump for a customer, he noticed an elderly lady approaching with hesitant steps. She stopped beside her car, her eyes filled with worry as she rummaged frantically through her purse. "Do you need help, ma'am?" Luke asked, approaching her with a warm smile. The elderly woman, whose gray hair fell gently over her shoulders, looked at him with eyes full of apprehension. "Oh, my dear, It seems I forgot my wallet at home," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Dorothy, and I don't know what to do now." Luke noticed the embarrassment on her face. He could simply point her to the convenience store next door, where she might find a temporary solution, but an impulsive decision took over him. "Don't worry about it," Luke said, pulling out his own credit card from his pocket. "I'll cover the cost for you." Dorothy hesitated, her eyes widening in surprise. You don't have to do that, dear. I can come back later with the money." Luke shook his head, smiling. "Consider it a gift. We all have our tough days, and today seems to be one of them for you. I'll take care of it." Without waiting for another response, Luke inserted his card into the machine and paid for the gas. Dorothy watched in silence, her eyes misting with gratitude. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said, lightly touching Luke's arm. "You're a true angel." Luke shrugged, trying to downplay the gesture. "It was nothing. I just want you to be at ease." Dorothy smiled, and that smile seemed to light up the entire gas station. "Thank you so much, really. I will never forget this." As Luke returned to his workstation, he noticed some of his co-workers whispering and casting critical glances in his direction. He knew they were talking about him and that he might be facing consequences for his choice. But for Luke, doing what was right was always worth the risk. What he didn't know was how costly this act of kindness would turn out to be. Luke's shift was almost over when he heard his name called over the gas station's intercom. "Luke, please report to the manager's office." A chill ran down his spine. He knew that call was not a good sign, especially after what he had done for Dorothy. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward the small office at the back of the station, trying to mentally prepare for what was to come. Donald Johnson, the station manager, was sitting behind a desk cluttered with papers, his expression serious, almost stern. He was a stocky man, with a face marked by years of stress and a posture that exuded authority. When Luke entered, Donald didn't even look up from the papers. "Sit down, Luke." Luke obeyed, his heart racing. The silence that followed as Donald reviewed the documents on the desk felt unbearable. "I heard you paid for a customer's gas today," Donald finally said, lifting his gaze to Luke. His tone was direct, almost devoid of emotion. "Yes, sir. She had forgotten her wallet and was visibly distressed. I thought it was the right thing to do, and I used my own money to cover the cost," Luke replied, trying to keep his voice steady but feeling the tension rise. Donald sighed deeply and leaned back in his chair, intertwining his fingers on the desk. "You know this goes against the company policies, don't you? We have rules for a reason, Luke. We can't allow our employees to make decisions based on emotions. It sets dangerous precedents." Luke felt a lump in his throat. He knew the situation was serious, but he still hoped the manager would understand his intentions. "I understand, sir, but I thought that, considering the circumstances, I could make an exception. There was an elderly lady in trouble, and all I wanted to do was help." Donald's face hardened even more. "This isn't about money, Luke. It's about principles and discipline. When you break a rule, even with good intentions, you jeopardize the structure we maintain here." The reality of the situation began to dawn on Luke. He had crossed a line that, for Donald, was non-negotiable. "So, what's going to happen now?" he asked, though the answer was already starting to form in his mind. Donald leaned forward, his cold eyes fixed on Luke's. "I'm firing you, Luke. Effective immediately." Those words hit Luke like a punch to the stomach. He felt stunned, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Being fired for something he believed was an act of kindness felt cruel and unjust. Even so, Luke managed to stand up, despite the sense of weakness that was overtaking his body. "I understand," he said, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "Thank you for the opportunity to work here." Donald nodded, already turning his attention back to the papers on his desk, as if the conversation was over, as if Luke was nothing more than a crossed-off item on a list. With heavy steps, Luke left the office. Every movement felt more difficult than the last, as if the weight of the world had doubled on his shoulders. The decision to help Dorothy, which until that moment he hadn't questioned, now felt like a burden. He knew he had done the right thing, but the cost had been too high. Luke gathered his things in the locker room and left the station without looking back, feeling that somehow the world around him had become colder and emptier. He walked slowly down the street toward his home, his head down, lost in thought. With each step, the reality of his firing felt more concrete, crushing what remained of his spirit. The cold night wind seemed to cut through his skin, but nothing compared to the emptiness he felt inside. How would he tell his mother and sister? How would he explain that, for a simple act of kindness, he had lost the job he desperately needed? When he finally arrived at the small house where he lived with his family, Luke paused at the entrance for a moment, taking a deep breath and trying to gather his strength. He knew his mother, Linda, was always exhausted after long shifts as a nurse, and his sister, Ella, despite being young, was perceptive enough to sense that something was wrong. Pushing open the front door, he was greeted by the familiar sound of dishes being handled in the kitchen and the aroma of dinner. Linda was serving food while Ella, still in her somewhat wrinkled school uniform, finished setting the table. "Hi, son," Linda said with a tired but warm smile. "You arrived just in time. How was your day?" Luke hesitated in the doorway, feeling the eyes of the two most important women in his life on him. The knot in his throat tightened. "I need to talk to you both," he said, trying to keep his voice steady but failing miserably. Linda dropped the spoon she was using to serve the food and approached, the smile on her face disappearing as she sensed the seriousness in her son's tone. "What happened, Luke?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Ella, picking up on the tension, moved closer as well, her big brown eyes fixed on her brother as if she sensed the bad news. Luke sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing him even more. "I got fired today," he confessed, the pain of saying those words almost unbearable. "For helping a lady who forgot her wallet at the station. I paid for her gas. And the manager, he said I broke the rules and couldn't stay." The silence that followed was suffocating. Linda closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to process what she had just heard. When she finally spoke, her voice was choked. "That's so unfair," she murmured, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You did the right thing, Luke. Anyone with a heart would have done the same." Ella, still absorbing the news, looked at her brother with a mix of confusion and sadness. "Why would anyone fire you for being kind?" The question from Ella echoed in Luke's mind, but he had no satisfactory answer to give. Because apparently, following rules is more important than helping someone in need, he replied, bitterness seeping into his voice. Linda stepped closer, placing her hand on Luke's shoulder, trying to offer the little comfort she could. We'll get through this, son. We'll find a way. We always do. Luke felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he held them back. He knew he needed to be strong, especially for his mother and sister. I know, Mom. I just don't know how. That job was important. Linda pulled Luke into a hug, and Ella, though hesitant, joined them, wrapping her small arms around both of them. That family embrace, although it didn't solve their problems, brought a brief moment of comfort, a reminder that, despite the difficulties, they still had each other. Luke remained silent, feeling the warmth of his family's love. But deep down, the pain of injustice and the fear of what was to come wouldn't let him be at peace. He knew he needed to find a solution, but for now, the weight of uncertainty felt unbearable. Later, when night had fallen and the house was silent, Luke found himself in his room, lying on his bed, his gaze lost on the ceiling. His mother's and sister's words echoed in his mind, but the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. He had done what he thought was right, and yet everything had crumbled. How could he believe that good was worth it when the consequences were so severe? He was immersed in these dark thoughts when he heard knocks at the front door. The sound, sudden and unexpected, made his heart race. It wasn't common for someone to show up so late, and for a moment he wondered who it could be. Reluctantly, he got up, rubbing his tired eyes, and walked to the door. Upon opening it, he found a tall man in a well-tailored suit, with a serious but not hostile expression. Luke furrowed his brow, trying to recognize the stranger's face. "Good evening. You're Luke, right?" the man asked, his deep voice filling the space between them. "Yes, that's me," Luke replied, confused. "How can I help you?" The man gave a slight smile before extending his hand. "My name is Wyatt Taylor. I'm the grandson of Dorothy, the lady you helped today at the gas station." The mention of the name made Luke straighten up. "How is she? I hope she got home safely." "She's well, thanks to you," Wyatt said, a glint of gratitude in his eyes. "And that's exactly why I decided to come personally to thank you." Luke shook his head, trying to push away the modesty that always accompanied him. "It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." Wyatt chuckled softly. "I disagree, Luke. Not everyone would go out of their way to help a stranger, especially in a situation like that. You not only helped my grandmother, but you made me realize something important." Luke furrowed his brow, even more confused. "And what would that be?" Wyatt took a deep breath, his expression becoming more serious. "My family owns that gas station, and when I heard what happened, and especially when I learned that you were fired for doing what you did, I was furious. That's not the kind of behavior we want from our employees nor from our managers." Luke felt a tightening in his chest upon hearing that. "I didn't know you were the owner. I'm sorry for any trouble this may have caused." Wyatt raised a hand, interrupting him. "You didn't cause any trouble, Luke. On the contrary, you did what was right, and that's why I'm here. I want to offer you an opportunity. I want you to come back to the gas station, but this time as a manager." Those words hung in the air for a moment as Luke tried to process what he was hearing. "Manager? But I just got fired. Why would you do that?" Wyatt smiled, this time more warmly. "Because we need people like you, Luke. People who put the well-being of others above everything else. You have the kind of integrity we want leading our team. I know it's a big responsibility, but I believe you can do it." Luke fell silent, still trying to absorb what was happening. Everything felt surreal, as if he were living in a dream. The idea of being promoted directly to manager right after being fired was something he never could have imagined. I don't know what to say, he stammered finally. This is unexpected, but I accept. I accept the challenge. Wyatt extended his hand again, and Luke shook it, feeling a wave of relief mixed with a new sense of purpose. Welcome aboard, Luke. I'm sure you'll do an excellent job, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Luke nodded, still at a loss for words. Wyatt said goodbye and walked away, leaving Luke standing by the door, staring into the emptiness of the street. When he closed the door, he felt the weight of the day begin to lift, replaced by a new responsibility, but also by a new hope. He returned to his room, where moments before he had been engulfed in despair, now with a faint smile on his lips. Things had changed in a way he could never have predicted, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that everything would be all right. The next day, Luke woke up with a mix of anxiety and determination. The memories of the previous night were still vivid in his mind, but now there was a new responsibility on his shoulders. It was his first day as the gas station manager, and he knew the challenges would be many. He dressed carefully, choosing a shirt that conveyed professionalism but was also comfortable. Before leaving, he looked at himself in the mirror, trying to imagine what his new routine would be like. It wasn't just a job, it was a new chance to prove himself, to show that kindness and integrity could coexist with professional success. Upon arriving at the station, he felt the gazes of his colleagues fall on him. The surprise was evident on everyone's face, and not without reason. Luke had been fired the day before, and now he was back, not as an attendant, but as the manager. "Good morning, everyone," he said, trying to sound confident but without arrogance. "I know this change may seem a bit sudden, but I'm here to help. Let's work together to make this place the best it can be." The employees exchanged glances, some visibly skeptical, others just curious. Luke knew that earning their trust wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to do it the right way. He spent the morning familiarizing himself with the administrative aspects of the station, reading reports and understanding the dynamics that, until then, he had only glimpsed from a distance. The responsibility of leading a team, of making decisions that would directly impact the success of the business, was heavy, but he felt ready. However, not everyone was prepared to accept his leadership. Joe, one of the oldest attendants, was known for his difficult personality and for resisting any kind of change. He approached Luke during a break, his face set in a skeptical expression. "So, the guy who got fired yesterday is now the boss?" Joe said, his voice laden with sarcasm. "How does that make sense?" Luke remained calm, knowing that this confrontation was inevitable. "I understand that it might seem strange, Joe, but I'm here to work alongside you, not above you. I want to help improve things, for everyone." Joe let out a heavy sigh, crossing his arms. "We'll see if your actions match your words, rookie." That brief but tense conversation made Luke aware that, despite the opportunity he had been given, the road wouldn't be easy. He would need to prove, day by day, that he was worthy of that position, not only to his superiors, but to all those who worked by his side. But Luke was ready for that. He knew that leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about building trust, listening, learning, and above all, being fair. With that mentality, he dove headfirst into his new duties, determined to show that even in a world where kindness often seemed to be punished, it could still be the foundation of something greater. The following days brought a challenging routine. Luke began to listen attentively to his colleagues' complaints and suggestions, implementing changes that gradually started to take effect. Work organization improved, communication became clearer, and even Joe, though reluctant, began to show signs that he was willing to cooperate. Luke understood that to earn his team's trust, he needed to lead by example. Every day he arrived early at the station and was the last to leave, ensuring that every task was completed accurately. But more than that, he focused on creating an environment where each employee felt heard and valued. One day, during an impromptu meeting with the team, Luke decided to address an issue he knew was sensitive. He stood in front of the small group, trying to find the right words. "I know things have changed very quickly around here," he began, choosing his words carefully. "And I understand that it may have been difficult for everyone to adjust. But I want you to know that I'm here to support you, not to impose anything. If there's anything we can improve, I want to hear from you." There was a brief silence, and then one of the cashiers, Sarah, spoke timidly. "I think we could reorganize the schedules. There are days when we feel overwhelmed because we're short-staffed, while on other days, there are more employees than customers." Luke smiled, pleased that she felt comfortable speaking up. "That's a great suggestion, Sarah. We can adjust that so the schedules are more balanced. Does anyone else have anything to say?" Joe, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, finally uncrossed his arms and stepped forward. His expression was less defensive, as if he was allowing himself to lower his guard. "I know I was hard on you, Luke, but I'm seeing that you really care about this place and about us. I have to admit, the changes you brought made a difference. If you need help with anything, you can count on me." Those words, coming from Joe, meant more to Luke than any other compliment he could receive. He knew that gaining the respect of that man was a sign that he was on the right path. "Thank you, Joe. I will rely on your experience indeed." As the improvements continued, the atmosphere at the gas station began to change. Customers noticed the difference in service, and the employees, now more engaged, seemed more satisfied with their work. Luke, in turn, felt that he was finally fulfilling his role not just as a boss, but as a leader. However, the most significant transformation was internal. Luke began to realize that by facing his own challenges and dealing with adversities, he was growing as a person. Each day was a new lesson, not only about management but about resilience, empathy, and the importance of staying true to his values, even when circumstances were tough. Over time, the gas station thrived under his leadership, becoming a place where teamwork and mutual respect were the foundation of everything. Luke had exceeded expectations, not only proving that he deserved the manager position, but showing that integrity and kindness, even in adverse situations, can transform any environment. It was on an ordinary day, while Luke was reviewing some reports in the office, that an unexpected visit occurred. The former manager, Donald Johnson, walked into the office, carrying a serious expression, but without the arrogance that Luke remembered so well. Donald's presence made Luke stop what he was doing and stand up, unsure of what to expect from this encounter. "Donald," Luke said, trying to keep his voice neutral, "what can I do for you?" Donald hesitated for a moment, as if he were choosing his words carefully. Then he took a step forward and looked directly into Luke's eyes. "I needed to come here and talk to you, Luke. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how things ended between us." Luke remained silent, allowing Donald to continue. The weight of the words that were about to come seemed to hang in the air. "I was wrong," Donald finally said, his voice laden with a sincerity that Luke had never seen before. "I was so caught up in the rules, in what I believed was the right way to do things, that I didn't realize what really mattered. Firing you was a mistake, and I want to apologize for that." Those words touched Luke in an unexpected way. He had been through a lot since that day, and hearing Donald admit his mistake brought a sense of closure that he didn't know he needed. "Donald," Luke began, with a tone of understanding, "I appreciate your words. I've learned a lot since then, too. I think in the end we all make mistakes, but what matters is how we deal with them afterward." Donald nodded, seeming relieved that Luke had accepted his apology. "I see now that you are the kind of person this place needed. You have done more for this station than I could have ever done. And for that, I respect you." Luke felt a wave of emotion wash over him. knowing that even Donald recognized his work and integrity was something he hadn't expected, but it meant a lot. "Thank you, Donald," Luke said genuinely. "That means a lot to me, and if you need anything, I'm here to help." Donald smiled faintly, something Luke had never seen in his former boss. "I think you've already done more than enough, Luke. I just wanted you to know that, even if I didn't see it before, I now understand the value of what you've done." With that, Donald said goodbye and left the office, leaving Luke alone with his thoughts. The room was silent, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence he had felt so many times before. It was a silence filled with peace, with a sense of mission accomplished. Luke sat down again, but this time, feeling a new type of satisfaction. He had started his journey amidst a storm of uncertainties and challenges, but now the waters were calm, and he was sailing toward a future that, while uncertain, seemed bright. Luke's story, his struggle and eventual success, had become an example that doing what is right, even in the face of the worst adversities, will always bring rewards. He had found not only financial stability, but also a renewed faith in his own values, and he knew that regardless of the challenges still to come, he was prepared to face them with the same integrity that had guided him thus far. Luke's journey was far from over, but he knew that wherever it led him, he would be ready with a steady heart and a clear conscience. We hope you enjoyed this narrative. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more exciting stories that touch the soul. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Thanks and critiques are also welcome. We'll see you in the next thrilling video. Until then,